for joining this Women Who Code conference today. Hope you're all having a great time with all of us. So it's my privilege to welcome all the panelists today for this innovation techniques for excelling in customer-facing issues. And let me quickly start with Misha Joshi. So Misha Joshi, welcome. And she is a sales director at Microsoft Consulting Services. She's a seasoned business leader with experience across sales, service, business transformation programs, and general management. So she has previously worked in system integrators like Vodafone India, and also has led professional services with VMware India. In addition to her day job, she mentors people and she also champions multiple D&I activities, diversity and inclusion related activities across organizations. It's my privilege to welcome you, Misha. So moving on to the next panelist, Surajit Singh. Hi, Surajit. So Surajit comes with over 25 years of experience in IT industry. He's currently working with Dell, and he's responsible for driving the storage platform and solution business across globally in APJ. He also handles India-based GSI partners at Dell. He has held various roles in his previous experience, such as sales leadership, management, channel leadership, and also field marketing. He is a frequent speaker at executive briefing sessions on topics like technology trends, digital leadership, and cloud strategy. Welcome, Surajit, once again. So moving on to my third panelist, Neil Waldron. Hey, hi, Neil. Thanks for joining us today. And Neil is currently a director sales at Nasdaq, and he has around 15 years of experience in the industry. And Neil had been working with almost 50% of listed companies on Australian Stock Exchange, and he provides Nasdaq award-winning SaaS product IR Insight and also institutional investor analytics to many Australian largest companies. It's my privilege to welcome you, Neil, for this panel discussion.
Thank you.
Moving on to the fourth panelist for the day, Seshu Venkata. Seshu is a general manager and global head for virtualdesk at Wipro, Cloud and Infrastructure Services. Prior to this role, he was a delivery head at Wipro, where he was responsible for large account planning, service delivery, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, competence development, and also hiring. So it's my privilege to welcome Seshu. Welcome, Seshu. And finally, moving on to our moderator for this panel discussion, it's my privilege to welcome Veena. Hey, hi, Veena. Thanks for joining us today. So Veena is currently a director inside sales with VMware, and she is catering to mid-market customers across India. With overall 18 years of experience, she has been deep into technology consulting and relationship management. So she has had an accomplished career working with companies like HCL, Lenovo, Dell, and she is a dynamic, result-driven sales strategist and has a solid track record securing the key clients and increasing the product distribution to grow the market share. So it's my privilege to welcome you, Veena, as a moderator for the panel discussion. So all said, and with any further ado, I'm handing it over to Veena for this, very inspiring, innovative techniques panel discussion. Thank you.
Hey, thank you, Pavitra. Quite a heavy introduction for all of us. Welcome all of you. I'm sure that there's a lot that you can take away from this session. And we definitely have a very diverse team out here, right? When you look today at customer-facing role, right? You just don't hold the responsibility of your brand, but you also carry the impact that you will have on your organizations as such, right? And you look at any organization today, you talk to any hiring manager, everybody is looking out for somebody who's just not good at their roles, right? We're looking for somebody who's remarkable at their roles. And, the word for that is linchpin, right? This is a book that I'm reading of late. And, in simple terms, if I have to tell what a linchpin is, so if I have to give you an option, let's say, dinner for tonight to be cooked by your cook or a chef, hands down, I'm sure that everybody's going to go back and ask for the dinner to be cooked by the chef, right? No different with the industry, no different with your customers, no different with the hiring manager, right? Everybody is looking for somebody who can go back and create a masterpiece out of every work that he or she delivers inside their organization. Now, the first question I probably have for every panel member out here is that when you go back and hire somebody in customer-facing roles for your respective job functions, what is that one thing that you typically look out for and why? Misha, you want to get started?
Yep, sure. So thanks, Veena. And yes, very interesting topic and a very difficult question, right? When you're selecting people for customer-facing roles, I look for something that's very uncommon, if I may say. That's common sense. What do you know what is right for the customer and for the organization, and can you make a decision in that point in time as to what's the right thing to say or do? And that is my top quality that I like to pick for.
Great. I think extremely important to the roles and jobs that we do today. Surajit, what's your answer for the question? I think we've lost Surajit. Neil, do you want to take that up?
Yeah, most certainly, Veena. So it's a great question, actually. I was thinking about this recently, and I think one of the most important qualities I look for when I'm hiring someone is learnability. So their ability to learn, be curious. I'm interested in what they're reading, what they're consuming by way of information. Obviously, their resume or curriculum vitae, as we call it, will embody their educational achievements. But I like to see someone maybe who's doing something extracurricular that's also on the resume, because I think as a new starter you have to learn internal processes, you have to learn and adapt to the culture, and it denotes a certain adaptability as well. And I think the only way to stay ahead in this business that we're in, information technology more widely, is to be constantly curious, be constantly learning, not being told by your manager to read the latest technology white paper, but to be interested in it sufficiently enough to do it yourself. So learnability would be the main thing that I would say there.
Can't agree more on that, Neil. Surajit, your thoughts on the question, please.
I'm sorry, there were some technical problems. I didn't quite capture the question. Do you mind repeating it for me?
Yeah, so we were generally discussing about, you're all hiring managers in your respective roles, right? And there are certain, functions within your team that's clearly customer facing, right? So what are some of the things, right? What is that top one thing that you look out for in a hiring candidate when you're hiring somebody in customer facing role, right? And why do you think that particular asset is really important for you?
Well, I got to agree with Neil. I think ability to learn quickly is by far the most defining attribute that we look for. Of course, there are other usual traits. We look for relevant background, relevant experience, but nothing trumps the candidate's ability to learn. That, however, is easier said than done, because it's kind of hard to test that during an interview process, no matter how exhaustive or how carefully you design the process. So one of the techniques that we use is we do reference checks, right? We do reference checks specifically for this attribute, whether the person is capable of learning and learning quickly. Also, it goes without saying, also unlearning, because we hire people with generally people in my team have considerable amount of experience, and sometimes that sort of clouds their judgment and sets some biases. So it's equally important to unlearn some of the stuff that we have picked up during the course of our careers, besides, of course, learning new things.
Yeah, bang on. I think, it stands on top of the list for a lot of us, right? The ability to kind of undo what you've learned and have the appetite to kind of go back and redo certain things from a learning career perspective, right? Misha, my next question is for you, right? I lead the mid-market space, right, in India market, right? And when I go back to my customers and talk about the product, they're pretty excited about the product, right? Happy to kind of go back and spend on the product. But when I get onto the table for a negotiation, right, the first thing that they ask is, can I get the services free of cost, right? So how do you kind of go back and manage this, this whole thing between managing customers' expectation and delivering the services? How do you get the whole balance right?
Okay, so firstly, I'd like to call out, that now that 99% of the world is working remotely,
Yeah.
if it was difficult earlier, it is very, very, very difficult now, right? And I have a lot more respect for people who do inside sales or who do sales remotely, as to how do you catch hold of customers and how do you convince them about something. But having said that, I think the most relevant analogy to how do you get customers to understand the value of services is that of installation of something as complicated in my mind as an air conditioner. You've bought the machine, but then you need to do the piping, you need to do the wiring, you need to go ahead, configure it, explain to the people who are going to use it, how it's useful to them, etc., etc. And while you have the IoTs of the world and the artificial intelligence you may build in for some things to be done, there are some things that actually have to be done. You have to do the plumbing, the fitting, the connections, etc., and then be smart enough to utilize it the way you want to, right? And despite the air conditioner fitting being one of the most complicated things, I think, when it comes to software, it's far more than what you can think of. And more often than not, we've seen that customers don't know how to make the best use of their product and license investments that they may have made. And so when we start speaking with them, try and understand what is the problem that we're trying to solve, right? Therein lies the answer as to where is the value of these services, right? You can't go to an artist and say, hey, let me take the cost of your paintbrush, your paints, your canvas, and okay, let's give you $20 for the hour that you spent, drawing your piece of art on it. That's not how it works. So it's the complicated engineering that goes in it, the solutioning, the thinking. That's what you're paying for. And it's only after the customers understand that you're here to solve a problem for them, that you're bringing something to them that they don't already understand or know about. That is, I think, when it clicks in their mind that, okay, let's start talking. Of course, the selling process is a very long thing even after that, but I'll stop there for now.
Hey, thanks, Misha. That leads me to the second question, right? And I'm probably going to go back and ask Surajit about his view on this, right? The whole world, has moved to the virtual platform today, right? Very different from what you were doing probably for many, many years now, right? And you're somebody who's always been engaging with customers. You talk to me about the time zones that you're interacting with, right? And this whole shift is here to stay, right? This is not something that we can get off in the times to come. With a lot of companies really contemplating about having their workforce working remotely and all of that, right? So, in these times, what are certain things that you think we can bring in from a sales perspective, or let's say a customer engagement perspective, innovatively, to have the customer hooked on for a conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, really, and I'm sure everybody can relate to this problem statement. So when we talk about relationship, it always equates with trust, right? And that's true for customers. That's true for team members. So how do you ensure that you are able to build and ensure that the relationship grows and trust is established between customers and us, between team members and team leaders and team members and other members of the team. So there are a few techniques. I'm sure all of us have been experimenting with different things, but there are some things that I have tried using and they work for me. So one of the things, I before the panel discussion started, I was just sharing that I have a lot of Zoom calls, and they start early in the morning and sometimes go till very late in the night. So when I schedule Zoom calls, I've started scheduling Zoom calls for 25 minutes or 55 minutes instead of 30 minutes or 60 minutes. So I just give myself 5 minutes just in case my call overruns. Also, that 5 minutes is a reasonable amount of time for me to really reboot and reorient my thoughts, gather my thoughts, and be prepared for the next call. That way you're fresh and you can give your best, okay, in every call. The second technique that I use, and it works for me, and I encourage most of my team members to do the same, is to turn the video on, right? And I know it can be difficult and challenging. Some people live in smaller homes, right, and they have children, and it becomes a little challenging for them to turn on the video at all times. But nevertheless, I always encourage people at the opposite end to turn the video on, because there's nothing like seeing a person's face. And there are so many cues in terms of facial expressions and body language that enables you to listen a lot better. In the kind of roles that we have, one of the most important skills that we use to be successful is our listening skills, right? And you don't just listen to a voice; you listen to the body language and to the cues that are subtly delivered when you are looking at somebody's video. Never underestimate the personal connect, right? So no matter how busy the schedule is, no matter how cut and dry the agenda is, there's always time for small talk and to exchange pleasantries, right? So even in a 25-minute even in a 25-minute call, right, I think it makes sense to, spend a couple of minutes and exchange pleasantries, and that, always holds you in good stead. It just shows the personal touch, right? Just proves that there's a human being at the other end of the line, right? And then, just be professional, because everybody's time is valuable. And the problem I talked about, that's not a unique problem unique to me. Everybody has the same challenge, right? So everybody expects to get the most out of that time that they're investing. So, have a clear agenda, have a clear set of outcomes in mind, make it, communicate that in advance, so that, the person knows what you expect from the call, and therefore, that person can come prepared and you can get the most out of call. And that way, next time you have a call scheduled with the same person, he or she is looking forward to talking to you. Active listening, how often has it happened that, we have a team call or a group call, and then, we don't know, how many people are listening, right? And so it's important to, give verbal and non-verbal cues to let people know that, hey, you're following them, and, you understand or you disagree. So that's another technique, that works well for me. And then, it's again something that all of you would be able to relate to, right? In group calls, especially, there are one or two people who really hog, the time and the bandwidth, right? Whereas there are many other people, especially in remote, in the on these calls, they may feel left out, right? So one of the practices that I usually follow is that I save some time at the end of every meeting to just go around and ask people for their opinion and their views on, the topic that was discussed, right? So those are some of the techniques that I use to ensure that, we maintain the personal touch, and we continue to build a relationship. And, there's always the feeling that you're dealing with human beings and not, robots.
Neil, anything that you'd like to add on to it? A vast topic, right? I'm sure that, everybody has their own set of experience when it comes to going back and getting ready for a call with a customer, right? Anything that you want to add on to what Surajit mentioned?
Yeah, well, I think what Surajit mentioned about leaving 5 minutes is a great idea, because you're able to get to the bathroom then as well, which is obviously critical during a busy day of meetings. And actually make a cup of tea. It's surprising how much you could do in 5 minutes before Zoom meetings, especially if you've got children. But look, I agree with Surajit. I think everything he said was spot on. Look, something that I do lately, and especially with more senior prospective clients, this is maybe more from a sales perspective, but also current clients, it can go down well, is basically, positioning yourself as a trusted advisor. Now, Surajit mentioned trust there, and I think we've all touched on it. One way to gain trust quickly, I think, with a senior executive, whether it's a CIO, CTO, who's ultimately reporting to a CEO as well. So the CEO is looking at the long-term strategy of the business, risks, opportunities. One part of that is obviously information technology, whether it's cybersecurity, scalability, et cetera, and that's typically the responsibility of, as we know, the CIO or CTO, depending on the organization. So I tend to pitch ours as a software as a service kind of financial sector. So I pitch to the CEO or CFO typically. I have been in different roles where the CIO is my person. But what I do is, if there's people I find it difficult to connect with, they don't seem to have time for me, I basically ask them if they've got 20 minutes to catch up for an executive briefing on the key trends that are going to affect. I talk about their share valuation and their share trading, because that's what CEOs are thinking about, because it affects their share price, which affects their share plan and their business. But obviously, depending on your audience, you would mention a couple of key things, whether it's cybersecurity risk or whatever's pertinent for you. And so what that does is it's a way to you commit yourself to keeping across these key trends, and then you kind of commit yourself to having to keep learning about them, so you can show up with very senior execs and talk about them. But it does yield results. It yields substantial results at the top end of town, and it differentiates you against the typical salespeople who might just be talking about what our service does, what our product does. Obviously, solution sales is a great approach. What are your challenges? What are your goals? But you can actually go beyond that, I think, sometimes with the most senior decision maker, to say, just give me 20 minutes and I'm going to give you some information that you aren't getting anywhere else. And you'll see me as a very key resource for you to help you stay across the key trends that you should be worried about, to ultimately report onto your CEO. And that's been a real technique for me. That's been an email with that in the subject line. Meetings have followed. And funny enough, my focus is sales. So I closed a pretty good deal earlier today. And I pitched for them 3 years ago. And they were like, no, they did a kind of sample of a report. They weren't interested. And then I caught up with the CEO separately to share the key trends that was affecting his liquidity and valuation and build credibility with him. Didn't try and sell anything. 20 minutes, Jeff, I'll leave you there. He hired a new manager in the area that we sell to. And then we got a chance to pitch again and ultimately won the business. So that's happened a couple of times where I've lost big opportunities, but I've gone back to share key trends. And then they've just gone, hey, Neil, we want to talk about this again. This is on the radar. So it's a bit of a kind of strategic technique. It does commit you to, it's not a gimmick. You have to keep learning, and you're going to go up against CEOs and investment bankers. In my book, you'll be up against very opinionated CIOs. So you need to know your stuff. But I think no matter how junior you are, how early you are, or how senior you are, I think it's always worthwhile. If you're senior, you're going to be doing it anyway because it's part of your job, but it's always worthwhile. Understand what the key trends are, what are the key risks, what are the key opportunities, and have an opinion. Don't just read it from The Economist or don't just read it in the newspaper. Take stuff from publications, but just have an opinion. It might be wrong, it might be right. Nobody knows what the future holds, but have an opinion and engage at the senior level, I think would be good advice.
Yeah, so on the lighter side, right? One of the things that has really caught up speed in our side of the town is investment banking. I'm not very sure if you're following the stock exchange here in India. The sentiments are high, and everybody that I know across is an investment banker today, right? Everybody is putting their money in stakes today. But just to follow up on the same topic that we're talking about, right? You get to interact with a lot of C executives, right? I was running through your LinkedIn profile, and you talk a lot about engaging with top companies in your radar. And I'm sure that the same is a target list for your competitors as well, right? And then it brings down the whole fact that, how do you kind of bring in, a value to the entire conversation, right? What is it that the customer needs, and how can you bring in that value add to the entire conversation and thereby meet or probably exceed the customer expectation? Give us some examples of how this has been a game changer for you and how do you incorporate these into your customer conversation?
Yeah, sure. Certainly. So I think it's that approach of the trusted advisor. So basically, and you talk about when you sit down and talk about costs with people, if you've really built value in yourself as a person who can be there, trusted advisor, and ultimately then your organization, I think that reduces the conversation about costs, because guess what? The lowest cost competitor, and I'm old enough to have a couple of kids, and I'm almost old enough to be a grandfather, so I'm not dissing young people, but the low margin competitors don't have senior people working for them because they can't afford it, because they cut their margins. They don't have people who have been in the business 12, 15, 20 years like us, because we value culture, we value we value the longevity of staff's experience and seniority, etc. So you differentiate yourself immediately when you go in as someone who knows the business. I think thinking like the customer, so getting in their shoes, putting their hat on, thinking, what would I be worried about? And even in practical sense, if there's a cybersecurity breach, in my world, that affects, whether you have to report to the stock market or not, because it could be material. In a more technical world, obviously it's more immediate, how do you kind of respond to it and kind of avert the crisis if possible. But I would be thinking, if there is a risk, if this is a growing risk, ransomware, for example, how could it affect clients in certain industries? What are other clients doing to respond well to it? And I'd also just be thinking of like a CIO or a CEO, like personally, they're going to deal with a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety. They're going to have people asking these questions. So to bring that to them proactively as a trusted advisor, I think helps provide that value and again, establish that relationship. And then once you've done that, you follow up. It's not just like, hey, I'm going to be your trusted advisor and here's 4 or 5 key trends. It's like, okay, you've done that now, but every time you read something about trend A, you send it to them with opinion on it or how it might affect them. Trend C, or they're mentioned in an article or a publication, about that trend. Hey, listen, I thought, so you're constantly, and the generic term is content marketing, but that can often be like funnel businesses and maybe just retail businesses. But you're kind of being a content marketer with relevant information that relate to those trends that you presented. So you kind of, in that sense, demonstrate that you, as a service provider, you will also keep them abreast of trends. I talk about Nasdaq.
Right.
I say we don't just provide analytics and software. What we do is we keep across key trends, risks, opportunities, and then our software and our analytics are designed to answer those risks and prepare you to maximize those opportunities. So that's what they are. Whereas other competitors say we just do reports, we just do software. You asked for an example. So there was one large biotech company in Australia, and they weren't being included in this key ESG focused index, right? So that's that basically just helps them get more investors. It helps the share price go up, everybody get their bonus, etc. So I called them and I said, you're not getting a good score from this provider. We've picked it up. You should be aware of it. They said, what do you mean? We've invested so much money in ESG. This is crazy. I'm like, don't shoot the messenger. It's not us, But I had a call with their head of ESG advisory globally, and they ultimately addressed it themselves. They didn't pay us for our service in that area. And then about a year later, I caught up, and it was a sales pitch, but it was kind of the trends. And then I had a one PowerPoint slide on all the things I'd been in touch with in the preceding year relating to those trends. And they're like, so you're kind of demonstrating substance as well. You're not saying I'm just a salesperson, I'm here to position this and walk away. You've already shown them that you are a value-adding, proactive, trusted advisor. The last thing on the list was I gave them an update that they were included in this ESG index. And they said, you know what, Neil, we got included in that index because you called us a year before and told us we had a low score from that benchmark provider. I hope I'm not confusing people. And they said, that's the reason we got into it. I'm like, well, there you go. So it gives a good example of the value Nasdaq provides proactively. So that's just one example. But again, it's just something I've been doing lately. And it's really quite exciting because it means you do have bigger conversations where you're challenged more, and it's kind of exciting in the process. I hope that answers your question, Veena.
Yeah, it does, Neil, right? I think, customer look for relevance and something more than what, usually, you as a vendor can kind of go back and provide, right? And a lot of times when you're interacting with customers, they seem to know it all, right? They seem to know much more than you, a lot more about what's really happening in industry and what's really trending, right? So, and I'll fall back on what Surajit said, right? Maintaining that relationship with customers is so very critical. And, sometimes that's what really gets you across the line, right? So anyway, then moving on to the next question. Seshu, thanks for joining in. We had some glitches, but I'm glad you're here, right? Now, you've been in the role of delivery lead for a long time, Seshu, right? And for me, when you look at a delivery lead, I mean, it's a hybrid role, right? You've got to interact with project, there's design, there's engineering, and then everything is closely tied with the timeline, right? And then on one side, you've got your customers, and the other side, you've got business needs to kind of go back and address you, right? And you've got to kind of go back and maintain the balance between the two. So, as per you, right, what do you think are some of the things that really drive result in the job that you do? I think you're on mute, Seshu.
Yeah, can you hear me? Great, yeah. No, I think it's an interesting question. I think, most of us go through this journey day in and day out. And, for me, there are two things, that defines my day and the week and the month and the year ahead, right? One, how do I keep our customers happy and delighted all the time, right? Second thing, how do we keep our employees happy? How do we maintain the employee satisfaction, right, in this journey? Because if we need to maintain the right balance between these two, and kind of they are related to each other. If we have satisfied employees, it's easy to deliver a service that delights our customers. At the same time, if our customers are delighted and happy, then though the employees are working overtime, working hard, at the end of the day, actually they go home, and then get nice sleep. So, and of course, there are a lot of elements in between. So as a delivery leader, right, I think we need to orchestrate all these elements in between, whether it is the technology, whether it is the partners, right, or whether it is the processes, whether it is the stakeholder management, the communication. Many times, right, we will have the same set of customers, same set of employees, but if you don't manage these elements in between, right, we may not be able to deliver the desired outcome. So this is where, I end up spending most of the time because we deliver virtual desktops as a service to our customers. Today, every single day, more than 1 million users touch our platform. So which means I tell my team, hey, what you do every hour, every minute is impacting 1 million users, probably 8 to 10 hours a day. That's the most of the time they spend their time on this platform, right? So how do we continuously improve? When I acquire the customers, most of the times, the customers are happy the moment they come to our platform on day one. But for some customer, it takes like 3 months. Some customers, it goes up to 6 months, to get that customer delight, right? So how do we address the challenges, the problems, right? And then in an amicable manner, right? So sometimes when there are problems, that's when actually the tempers go high on both sides. Customers say team problem, team will say it's a customer environment problem, application problem. So this is where we need to maintain the balance, getting the both parties to the same table, because many times, right, if you don't maintain that cool and that balance, things can actually take more time to resolve than what it would take otherwise. Right? So getting the teams to the right mindset, let's come to the table to solve the problem rather than trying to find faults, right? Whether it is many times it could be different teams, right, within our own organization, or sometimes it could be a discussion with multiple teams in the customer organization versus multiple teams within the organization, right? So how do we create a collaborative working environment, not only within our organization, but between our organization and the customer organization? I think this is where I end up spending more time, and I encourage my leadership team to spend more time, because the moment we address these things, right, it will drive the customer delight, which in turn drive the business growth, and then of course you will have everything what is required to keep your team happy. So, and it's not an easy journey, right? Sometimes in some customer environments, we could get there probably in 2 months. In some places, it can take 3 months or 6 months or a bit longer. Right. I think where, we have to be, the persistent and, trying to get to an environment where, all the parties talking to each other to deliver the, the customer delight. I think this is what, keeps me, energized and active all the time to look for opportunities for areas of improvement, because every time many times when we see the problem, it's quite natural that the people can get disturbed and irritated, right? So but when you encounter the problem day in and day out, we need to look at, yes, we have a problem today at hand, we need to solve the problem, but then what are we doing to see that this problem is not happening for another customer, or it's not repeating for the same customer again, right? I think these are the elements that we need to continue to focus. That's where we can mature the product or the service that we deliver to the customers much faster than what it would take. Okay? And this is the area where I think I like the most in my job, like the continuous improvement and innovation of the service that we deliver, and keep our customers happy, and of course give peace of mind to our employees as well as customers.
Yeah, so you're literally running a concert job for us, Seshu, right? Integrating between different teams and driving results for your customers. Now, in any customer role, you go back and see there's so much of celebration about success, wins, remarkable stories that we go back and celebrate. We want to share the other side of it, right? Stories untold, some of the projects that didn't go well, any of those, landslides that you had while going back and delivering a project to your customers. Any story that's close to your heart, Seshu, that you'd like to share?
Certainly. I mean, many times, right, we think that success just happens. I mean, it doesn't happen. Okay, so it will go through its own, journey. Okay, in cases, right, probably we may have less challenges, but I don't think, if you're talking about any complex engagement, it will go, so smoothly. Okay, so one of the engagement, that that we have delivered. So we had kind of some challenges, in terms of the scope is not defined clearly. There are certain ambiguities, and there is a significant churn in terms of the leadership on the customer side, the leadership team or the team, on our side. So, managing, the churn, on the customer side, and managing the churn in the requirements is probably right. It's a key challenge, I think, that we see, whether it is a software development project or an infrastructure delivery project, right? This is a common element. But especially, on the infrastructure projects, right, the large scale infrastructure project, right?
Right.
The longer it takes, to address these challenges and stabilize the environment, it is the longer the impact, whether it is the financial impact or user experience impact, right? So, and this is where, we kind of try to break the problem into two boxes, right? And then there is an existing environment, because there are challenges in bringing up the new infrastructure because of there are multiple technology changes happening, migration from Win7 to Win10 happening, on-prem to O365 migrations happening, a lot of directory consolidations happening. There are so many projects happening that is impacting the new program transformation journey.
Right.
So, we have to take the existing platform and stabilize the platform to make sure that end users are not feeling that impact.
Correct.
Okay. So while we have a challenge between the two companies in terms of the contract challenges, etc., but we have to basically we have taken steps to make sure that we address, or we are kind of minimizing the impact to the end users who are consuming the service.
Great, thanks, Seshu. Surajit, a quick one with you, right? Now, you have these set of retention customers that we talk about, right? Customers who've been with us for long, right? They're happy with our services. They continue to buy from us, and we have a long relationship with them. And then, you reach a point where this customer just suddenly shifts off from you for whatever that has happened, right? A glitch in the technical support, glitch in the services, not happy with the price points, and you've lost the customer, right? What would you recommend, right? What do you think is typically something that the customer-facing team can go back and do to regain these customers that we've lost over a course of time?
Yeah, I mean, that is really fundamental to any customer relationship role. You got to listen, right? And you got to understand, right? And there are I tell my team there are war times and then there are peace times, right? And you got to stay close to the customer. It doesn't matter, what they're going through. And most customers do appreciate that, right? Most customers appreciate that you genuinely care about their business. You were seeking their time and seeking to maintain the relationship even when there is no active sales campaign underway, right? And that is invaluable. Most customers recognize that effort, right? And most customers reward that effort, because next time on, when something comes up, they are more sympathetic to your cause. And also, just by being in close contact with the customer, it also puts you in a position to get a much better appreciation of their business needs, business challenges, some of the issues that didn't go the way they had planned, they had anticipated. And I've seen this happen time and time again. And customers eventually come back and reward those people who value long-term relationships.
Yeah, I kind of agree that, right? I think it's important to stay connected with the customer, right? And there's no option left with us to kind of log off from that relationship. They probably look at us, when the right time comes. And I know of a lot of customers who've come back, right? Eventually, moved out from us. But I think the whole point that we continue to stay connected, we kept showing the value that we are bringing in. We also try to show them how we're trying to change our products and make it more relevant to the customer, kind of, continue to keep them interested in us. Misha, quick question for you.
Neil gave a great example of how he does it.
Yeah.
Right? So, without an agenda, right? You can continue to add value to a customer's environment, continue to enrich the engagement without necessarily having anything to sell, right? I mean, that doesn't need to be on the agenda. Even then, you can really enrich their experience, right? And the customers always value that. So that was a great story that Neil shared with us.
Yeah. Misha, coming back to the sector that you kind of go back and manage, the services side, right? When the whole pandemic hit us, the initial few months, I would say, went completely into understanding what was happening around, right? So it was the respond and the reflect phase of the 4 hours that we typically follow, right? And now we are in this phase of reimagining and rebounding, right? Business is internal to us, teams, organization, everybody is reevaluating the whole process, right? Now, the same goes with the services industry, right? You've reshaped yourself the way you're kind of going back and addressing your customers' requirement. What are some of the changes that you and your team brought about in the working model to be relevant to your customers?
Right. I'm going back to probably June last year when we had a Women Who Code session, which was around how do you build resilience and work remotely and all that. And if I look at myself in that session and myself now, it's completely different. I was so stiff. I was used to standing on a stage and speaking, but sitting in
Right.
front of your own computer camera and speaking is something very difficult to get comfortable with. But now it's like I just joined Microsoft a few weeks ago, and I got virtually onboarded. People were like, "You're very brave to get virtually onboarded." But I looked at it and I was like, "You're in the comfort of your own home, right? You don't have to ask anyone, hey, where's the pantry? Where do I get, where's the washroom? And then look at a set of alien walls, etc." It made it so much more simpler and so much more friendly, actually. So I guess it was similar with the teams because ours was always a field team, and being in front of the customer, something that is a comfort very difficult to get remotely. So and not just that, right? People across the world are dealing with very, very different things. You don't know what's going on in whose house. There are people who may not have the luxury of having a large house. So you have parents, you have their parents, you have their children. People are studying at home, working at home, cooking at home, cleaning at home, God knows what not. So I think the number one skill that everybody learned during this was empathy. Uh, Understanding that, having your video on is wonderful, but if you don't have it on, there must have been a reason behind it. And so initially, like Surajit mentioned, right, it's wonderful to be on video because you don't miss that interaction then. But we had to start getting comfortable with customers not switching their video on, or a team member is unable to switch it on, right, and so on. So empathy, number one. Number two, how do you continue to maintain the relationships? How do you do your courtesy call and have that little chit chat like the other panelists spoke about, despite being remote, right? And now you might think these are not things that you do to service the customer, but they are. Every small thing matters is what we learned. What I figured is, and this is what I told the team. Seshu said that, right? You need happy customers and you need a happy team. If your team is not happy, how will you make your customers happy, right? So what we said is, hey, everybody's sanity is important, right? Take one thing at a time. Don't try and do everything. People who are used to bagging in large deals, we said, okay, split it up into 4 parts. Get the smaller one in first. Let everyone feel comfortable because even customers are overburdened. Now, do you worry about how to get your teams working remotely, how to maintain your business continuity, whether somebody is in hospital or not? Or do you worry about, hey, I have to give this order to somebody? So, give them that
Right.
comfort that it's not always about getting that large order in. It's about solving your little problems. Take one step at a time. These are, as small as they may be, every drop in the ocean actually at the end of the day counts, right? And this may not be an end customer example. I'll give you an example. Actually, I want to put out two examples here. One of my days at Vodafone. I joined the company, and they used to sell these dongles at that point in time. I was leading sales for Delhi NCR then, and I joined and I was wondering why we're selling only voice plans. Why are we not selling data plans? Data is what the world needs. This many years ago. And I asked, why are we not selling our dongles? And somebody pointed me to a bag of dongles sitting in the corner somewhere and said, you see that bag? Yeah, it doesn't work. What do you mean it doesn't work? We sold it to a customer. It came back because it's very difficult to use. They're not plug and play. So I think I said they thought about it and we said, the number one problem is that we're not believing in our own product. So said, okay, do you use a dongle? Yes, we use a dongle. Do you use the same dongle? Yes, you use the same dongle. Does it work? It works. So why does it not work for the customer? because nobody's helped them, So what I figured out is simplifying the problem always helps. If the customer sees the simplicity of, what they want to do with it, it helps. So we went and said, okay, we solved your onboarding problem. We'll come and teach you how to use it. A small expense went a long way. And we became the number one data sellers in the world, in the country, across the company. And the second example I'd like to share is of Nirman, which was the Women in Tech initiative that we launched a couple of years ago. And we were hosting it last year. Some of the Women Who Code community who attended it then might remember. Actually, not last year. When was it? It was January, right?
Yeah, I guess it was January.
Yeah, and we split into 4 parts. We went to attend the first one. Now, here is where I consider that we were a customer. And the event company that was hosting the platform was a royal failure.
Yeah, I remember that.
First of the 4 sessions, nothing worked. Nobody could log into the platform. Those who logged in couldn't hear anything. Nothing was working. And we were all like in our heads are blasting off, burning. We're wondering, we're trying to create this inspiration and we bloody can't get one platform working. Interestingly, so we carried on with it. We recovered from that. We did what was necessary and we continued on with it. That was the good thing, right? Like my mom always says, if while driving you meet with an accident, keep driving, otherwise you lose confidence. So we kept going with it. And at the end of the event, we all came together and we said we should not pay the platform vendor because they did a really poor job. And even before we could go and say that to them, they came back to us and said, hey, don't pay us. Please don't pay us for this. What did we do? We did the right thing. We went and paid them for the portion that worked and did what was suitable. But as a customer, what was the first thing that came to me is, okay, they are understood. I didn't have to go and explain it to them. So I think that one thing, that empathy, and empathy comes in voice, in action, and in verbiage that you use in written communication. Everything is very important to adapt to. Sorry, long answer, but I felt these were very important.
Very relevant, Misha. I think the most important is these times is the empathy piece of it, right? And whether it's with your internal customers, your external customers, your people, I think that's what takes you a long way in building relationships, right? Neil, a quick one to you, right? Now, you've got a lot of these professionals today who are probably not in customer-facing role. They're probably doing a tech support role or something on the back end, right? And are looking to come into sales, right? Or something like, getting onto any other operations, which is a customer interaction role. What would your advice be to them, right? How do somebody do a reality check of whether he's ready or he or she is ready to move in to a customer-facing role?
Yeah, sure, Veena, great question. Look, I think that I know this sounds a bit cliche in the IT business, but I genuinely believe that we're all in customer-facing roles. If you're the help desk level 1, help desk level 2, if you're the CIO, you're reporting to the CEO, you're delivering service. And I've seen it a lot in Nasdaq. We have 220 people in Sydney, mostly software developers for our exchange technology and some other software I won't go into at the moment. But we have a support team as well. And I've seen a couple of support guys go from support roles, like basically level 2, help desk, on-ground help desk support, into solution sales on the technology side. So using that anecdotally, what do? They're just very personable, very helpful, very proactive, very responsive. There was one guy in particular, I don't think he's watching this, but a guy called Kirtan, who was just so good. Like every time you needed something, he was there straight away. Just really, you talk about Misha, talk about empathy and really understanding that people are in a tricky position sometimes and need your help. He had that empathy. And Seshu talks about the kind of the wow factor and creating kind of those magic moments for customers. Like he just wowed me all the time. I'm like, you are the best help desk guy I've ever had. I've had a few, and some of them were just mean. They're grumpy if they came to help you. Ultimately, those guys actually came to me. I remember one guy in particular, he came to me, asked me about a company on my LinkedIn. Could you make an introduction? And I didn't actually get back to him because I couldn't with confidence make an introduction because I'd seen him operate in real life when everybody is kind of themselves in a work environment. So the short answer I would give if I can is treat every role as a customer facing role, because everybody you interact with especially if you want an internal move in the company, is going to be observing you in your natural habitat and will be judging you on a daily basis, subconsciously or consciously, and you can make very good impressions, or you can make the opposite. So yeah, I think, and that's the thing is with IT people who are technical and then have that interpersonal skills and have that the proactivity, the engagement. Anybody who's a head of sales is like, oh my God, we'd love to have them as a salesperson but we want the salespeople to have the technical knowledge, because that's the hardest thing to get sometimes. So if you've got someone who's technically proficient, well versed, and they have that interaction, whether it's a kind of technical solution selling role, or it's just a sales role or a customer service role, I think it's very obvious to see they have the traits. So treat everyone like a customer, be proactive, and be empathetic, and create wow wherever you can. I think they're the main points.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, Neil. Right? We go very aggressive in going back and hiring from campuses, and one of the top reps in my team, right? He comes in with law as a background, right? So he's got no connections with IT, right? Nothing to do with customer facing roles, and all this while he was ambitious about becoming a lawyer, and he's doing phenomenally well, right? So unless and until you have an appetite to, I think learning piece is extremely important, right? Once you take over, that's important. But there are a lot of these soft aspects that really work very well, right? And that's when you get a perfect source of what makes you really good in customer facing roles, right? So yeah, you are bang on, right? You hit the nail on that very particular aspect.
Can I mention one more thing, Veena? A very practical concern. If you are in a technical role and you're looking to get sales customer service, talk to the head of sales at the coffee machine. Talk to the head of customer service at the coffee machine. Introduce yourself at drinks. Hi, my name's John, whatever, I'm working here. What are you up to? Just make yourself known. That's just a very practical bit of advice I'd give people. It's so easy to impress a head of sales or a salesperson if you just show some proactivity, communicate with them, they know who you are, and then that could obviously set things up down the track.
Right. Surajit, one for you, right? A lot of your career, you've been in the field role, interacting with customers, partners, a whole ecosystem of people, right? You were always an external person, and all of a sudden you're this internal guy today, right? Do you find difference in the whole interaction between the field and moving now into a virtual background and having engagements with customers? What do you think worked in your favor, right? Are conversations now as effective as it was before? So what's working in your favor, and what do you think are probably more better when you kind of go back and sit across the table and talk to your customers?
Well, I mean, that personally, I would always prefer to meet a customer face to face. There's for me, there is no substitute for that. But given that we live in challenging times, and that's not always an option, we have to make the most of all the tools at our disposal, right? And I think technology has evolved and is very mature and robust, and we continuously adding new features that just makes the whole interaction more engaging and more interactive. So I think my recommendation to anybody looking to master the remote engagement would be to really master technology first, right? Understand all the features at your disposal, right? All the ways you can exploit a tool, and I don't want to name any tool, but all the different collaboration tools that we have, they're all very feature rich. Now, if you ask the average user, you would find that besides the obvious ones, they're not completely familiar with all the different tools and all the different features that these collaboration platforms offer. So that is one of the first areas that we can improve, to just make sure that our interaction with customers can be made more engaging and more compelling. The second thing about this whole remote interaction is it helps us be more productive, right? Think about it. Some of you live in Bangalore, right? You don't have to deal with the Bangalore traffic, right? Commuting from home to office. And even if you manage to get that done, right, by the time you reach office, you're mentally so exhausted that you can't get things started, right, without a couple of cups of black coffee. And so you don't have to go through that, right? And then you also don't have to really think about coming back home at a certain time. And so it gives you a lot more time to have a better work-life balance, and I know some of you may be throwing big brickbats at me because I said that, people just cram your calendar with more and more meetings, right? And So sometimes, this actually works the other way around, right? It takes away from your personal time too. But if managed well, I think it frees up a lot of time and it helps us become more productive. It helps us drive better quality engagements with both our customers and also with our family, right? So I think there are plenty of positives. It's not all negative. But going back to what I said at the outset, personally for me, there is no substitute for a face-to-face engagement.
Oh, I completely agree on that. Yeah, I completely miss engaging with people. That's key to the whole concept of we as human beings, right? We love interactions, and there's no substitute for it, right? Yeah, I think I'm hoping that the world kind of comes and we get to peace with all the thing that's happening around, right? One last question, Seshu, and with that, we'll probably go ahead and wrap this session, right? Now, when you're getting into these customer interactions, right? Not all customers are very clear about the objectives. They don't define, the whole thought of what they're expecting out of a project, or let's say anything that you're trying to go back and deliver to a customer is very bleak. Nobody has an idea, right? While he wants to go back and execute, but he doesn't know what right looks like, right? So how do you, and let's say you're a new sales guy in the team, right? Somebody who's new to the entire process. How do you gauge these reactions of customer and stitch the whole thing so that you kind of keep the customer happy at the same time you're getting things favorable to your organization as well?
Yeah. I think we end up seeing this kind of situations like more often, because there are a lot of moving parts. I mean, customer probably they would have a target goal where they want to go, but many times, right, they're confused on how do they reach that goal post, because of there are too many technology choices, and then there are a lot of moving parts, right? That actually makes the customers confused, and we can't blame them. And this is the kind of world that we're living in. So the way we handle such situations is we don't certainly, right, we keep the final objective, right, in mind. First we start focusing on the challenges, right? What are the challenges that they're facing today? That will help us to kind of determine the steps that required to be taken to reach the goal post, like as Misha mentioned, right? Rather than trying to solve the problem like in a big bang approach, right? How do we phase it out? Once we understand the challenges and then the prioritize the challenges, right? Then depending upon the type of situation, we say this is the roadmap, right? Let's go from here to there in these 4 steps. Okay. And then the second approach, let's first solve this problem. Yes, you have 20 problems, but in our view these 3 problems are more critical. Okay. Right, let's solve this problem. Let's have a 3-month and 6-month plan. Let's solve this problem. After 3 months, let's reassess the situation for the next 6 months plan. Actually, that also helps them to get a clarity. Yes, these guys are not trying to give a solution for a problem. I have been struggling for this problem for the last 1 year, and I'm living in. And if somebody comes in with a half-an-hour meeting, if he says I have a silver bullet, right? They also, unless, right, if you have solved the problem elsewhere, giving examples as they will trust. But if you have not solved the problem elsewhere, then breaking the problem into phases and then giving a roadmap, right, working with them to come up with that roadmap. I think this is the approach that we take to bring confidence in the customer and also help them to get clarity on the priorities so that we move forward.
Okay, thanks, Seshu. I think having small milestones, both for the customer and for ourselves is extremely important, right? And I think that's where you kind of build confidence. And then, by the time you hit the final line, you're showing him success at different paths, right? Thanks so much. I think, it was a great session. I thoroughly enjoyed moderating this session. Misha, Neil, Surajit, Seshu, some great insights from all of you. And I'm sure the audience has benefited from a lot of it. There's really no time for us to kind of go back and pick up roles, especially the customer-facing roles. The softer skills are so much more important. We spoke about empathy. We spoke about the ability to kind of go back and learn and relearn, and the whole art of going back and managing virtually, right? How can you still be effective irrespective of whether you're facing the customers or virtually, right? And staying connected with your customers. They are your customers of today. They're not your customers of today, but I think staying connected with them is extremely important. Thanks once again, and on that note, we shall go ahead and close the session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.